Hi everybody, Beth here from Access Paranormal for this week's I Want to Know. Apologies for last week. I had this horrible head cold which I've managed to kick it where it sun don't shine, and it's been great. So I'm back to being a lot more normal than usual for this week as well. So apologies again for that. As I said, this is a really interesting subject. And when it came through as a suggestion, because somebody had wanted to obviously talk a bit more about it. Hi Mel, hi Adam, how are you? I kind of thought, really? But then when you start to dig into it a little bit more, it's actually kind of fascinating, because you can go through like all these different tangents of, you know, the possibility, because, you know, we often talk about hauntings about ourselves and about objects and dolls and, you know, all sorts of stuff like chairs or whatever. But when it comes to plants or trees, it's like there's this whole other realm to look at, because you know, they're considered living things. So then, yes, so anyway, we'll start to dig into a little bit. As I said, I could talk about this for the rest of the night and you would just all be bored. But so we'll try and keep it as succinct as possible. Hi, Peter. Good to see you. Thank you much. Thank you. So firstly, all right, so having plants being possibly haunted or as haunted objects, and or could they actually hold imprints, and or could it be about residual energy? So for plants and animals, for plants and trees to possibly be haunted, there could be the possibility of it being residual, or it could be the possibility of it maybe holding imprints. That was the kind of the general question, which I really liked as well. Hi Chrissy, good to see you here, lovely one. So okay, I mean, obviously with something like this, the first thing you'd probably want to do is actually ascertain that it actually is like a plant could be haunted, or a tree could be haunted. I'm using trees as well because we'll talk about that a bit soon. But yeah, how would you know if a plant is haunted? Like, what does it appear in one area, then disappear, and then reappear? Does it make you feel differently? Does it move in a certain way? Well, it's kind of like, I mean, what would constitute a haunted plant or a haunted tree for that matter as well? So that's the first thing. I'm like, okay, so where have you found this information? What's giving you that option, or you know, or that thought process to give you that reason to think that it is? Then it's funny, when I always love reading the comments when I post a question like this, and I know but the Paul Mayo had mentioned that he said that when you know, the interesting thing about a plant or a tree, you know, being possessed, because they are seen as living things, you know. And of course, you know, most people have a belief where you could possibly be taken over by another entity, because we're also living things as well. So where does it actually stop, and how does it actually change, and you know, where do you draw the line? So if, you know, if a person could possibly be possessed, then what's to say that a plant or a tree couldn't possibly be possessed by another entity or spirit entity of some sort? So really interesting stuff, like where does the boundaries, you know, begin and start? And I just love it. It's just, yeah, totally awesome. Christy also mentioned as well, Christy Woods, that there's actually been some experiments in the 60s backing up sometimes with the possibility of plants actually having energy and you know, and basic recognition of energy as well. So I thought that was an interesting point to make as well. So if anyone wants to have a look and do a bit of Googling and sort of find out a bit more about that particular subject as well, go ahead. Awesome. But of course, actually, when you look through history, there's also a lot of cases where people have actually talked about in sort of basic, a lot of urban myth has been about haunted trees. So a lot of stories about haunted trees are in India. I mean, it's all across the world, but India has a lot of them. Probably maybe one of the most well-known ones I would say is in New Jersey, I think it is, and it's called the Devil's Tree. And the reason why it's called the Devil's Tree is because the story goes, there was a man that had killed his family, and then he went to this tree to kill himself. But over time, there's been a lot of people that have done the same thing or similar things, excuse me, remnants of a head cold. And then, of course, you know, there was actually also some speculation of the fact that the Ku Klux Klan would also murder people in this particular spot, hang people from this particular tree as well. And over time, people have found that this tree has a particular energy towards it. It has a particular feeling towards it. Some say almost like an electricity, as one comment was mentioned as well when I did my little bit of research. So And apparently sometimes, if you were to visit at night, and you were to leave, then there is a black ute that will follow you and then suddenly disappear. So, I mean, yes, it could be quite a lot of urban myth going on, but at the same time, really interesting kind of thing with the fact that over time, it's like what we talk about with residual energy, is something has imprinted possibly in that area that has kind of kept it there, and then obviously people are sensing it while they're there as well. Shirley says, I've always thought of plants, trees being a positive energy. Definitely a very interesting topic. Yes, exactly. That's, of course, I would as well. It's a lot of people that are very, very sensitive, very centered in their sensitivity, very particularly with their environment, will often go out for bushwalks or out into nature and hug trees, be able to get that energy back as well. So it's interesting the fact that there is already a sort of a thought and a belief that the fact that there is positive energy in these particular things, if you want to look at it that way, and yet what's to say that someone can't instill a negative energy into something like that, and for someone to also pick that up as well? Or maybe they come up like that. Maybe there's a way in which trees and plants would actually naturally be negative because of the area that tree is actually grown in. So little things like that's fascinating. You just like rabbit hole warren type stuff. It just I love it. It's really great. So, oh, hi Andrew, good to see you, mate. So there's that as well. Also another point to think of in the whole rabbit warren sort of side of this fantastic subject is that, can a tree actually be a ghost? Think of it that way. So maybe it's the other way around. So, sometimes somebody may say, I've walked into a place and I saw the scene get recreated, and, they walked past this tree that was never there. Well, is that the tree kind of being a ghost, or is it part of a scene playing out? Like, we really start to dig into this, and you can kind of think, well, what can explain that? And then of course what explains it, of course, with furniture that is seen in that particular scenario as well. Like, is it all residual, or is it, could furniture just turn up? Can furniture be haunted? I mean, we talk about haunted dolls, we talk about haunted, the fact that those kinds of things can happen. What can say that furniture or anything like that, or our surroundings can't be? Maybe why is it always possibly just one particular item? So yeah, it is mind blown, but fascinating stuff. Hi Daniela, good to see you, lovely one. There's trees near the asylum at Bandora. Paul says as well that he thinks might have something quite interesting happening there. I wouldn't mind reading a bit more about that at some point. That'd be really cool. So yeah, it's very interesting because it's not black and white, and it often isn't with the paranormal. There could be so many different reasons as to possibilities. If a tree could be haunted negatively, positively, or a plant as well. Maybe it's somebody who had passed over, really loved their plant and was really attached to it. So when they passed over, they're really around that particular object, just like we have this idea with haunted objects as well. So maybe that could be what's going on, or that could be a possibility. Maybe spirits can actually live in plants. So maybe they actually possess the plants themselves, or possess the trees themselves. So maybe it's an interactive energy that actually has an ability to be able to be in these particular, I guess you could say, houses, if you want to call it, which is obviously being a plant and or a tree, and possess it. Who knows? Who knows? We are literally just throwing ideas out there and seeing what's out there, sort of thing. Of course, a very popular thing with regards to plants and trees is the psychometry side of it. So it's the people who are very good and very in tune with their sensibilities are able to pick up, or hold a leaf or hold a flower and actually be able to draw upon it more about the person who held it previously that would not have known anything about it. So there's also that as well, if it's imprinted in there, or if it's an entity that can actually go into the plant and haunt it, if we could look at it that way. There are so many different options, as I said, and it's very difficult because plants obviously and trees don't speak to us, so we can't really actually go, so mate, what's going on? There's something a bit funky happening here, can you let me know? It's not quite as easy as that, of course. So a lot of it can be through interpretation of the mediums and psychics and things like that, and people having their empirical evidence style situations with their feelings with regards to investigating. So what if someone is laid to rest in a garden? See, that's another interesting thing as well. That's a great point to make. What happens to the grounds around cemeteries? I mean, often they are known to sort of have this sort of urban myth of being haunted, and a lot of, tours and things like that go on because people are buried in there. But what about the energy in there? If somebody, maybe it's because somebody's passed over and they're buried, that there is no physical energy left there for them to leave behind. But it's a really great point to make, and I just think it's fascinating, because you really do start going through all these little different corners with regards to this subject. So by all means, use the comment section down below. Let me know what you think. Okay, so have you known of haunted trees, or stories of, or have you heard of places where there are areas? I mean, there's the suicide forest in Japan. I mean, I can imagine the energy in something like that. So does it then start attracting people to go and do the same thing there, or is it just because the fact that people know it's there that it happens? So but you really go in very, very, very different angles with regards to whether or not it's residual, whether or not it's an intelligent thing. Is there a possibility? What's the difference? Why is it different from there compared to being with some people like ourselves, like actual live people, as opposed to actually being a plant or a tree? Really interesting subjects there. So anyway, use the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, everybody. It's a very, very... Oh, hang on a second. We've got another comment. My uncle's ashes were scattered in the garden at his home, so not just cemeteries. Again, ashes being scattered. Another way in which this, someone's remains are still there. Like, is there an energy still attached to those remains? Or somebody who's passed over that wants to be near that person, knowing that's there. Maybe it's ourselves. Maybe, say, in Mel's situation, her family may actually want to go to that area and be around him, knowing that particular area has his ashes. Is that intention actually changing the situation? We don't know. So, it's fascinating stuff. So use the comment section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next week, take care.